The wind crawled across the valley like something old and restless, like a memory unwilling to die. It slithered through brittle grass, rattled the dead oak by the corral, and scraped its cold fingers across the tired boards of a lonely ranch house that stood half swallowed by dusk. The building seemed unsure if it wished to stand another winter. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke and quiet suffering. James Harlow sat by the hearth, elbows braced against his knees, staring into the small iron pot hanging over the fire. The flames licked lazily at the metal, like even they were too exhausted to hunger. The pot held beans, barely half a bowl's worth, the last meal a man could call his. James wasn't starving yet, but hunger had begun to speak in the bones, a slow, creeping voice that whispered about surrender and forgetting. The rancher held a tin spoon between fingers cracked from rope and cold, staring at it as if unsure whether he deserved to use it tonight. He exhaled, slow and painful. The house answered with a shifting groan, wood old enough to remember better years. Years when Lillian's laughter filled these walls. Years when his young son Samuel ran barefoot through dust storms, chasing stray calves and coming home, grinning, with pockets full of rocks he swore were worth a fortune. Years before fever took them both, James closed his eyes against the memory. It hurt like a rusted nail driven backward through time. He forced himself to look again at the beans, counting them without touching. 17, maybe 18, enough to keep a man alive another day? Barely. He lifted the pot from the fire, hands steady despite the ache inside him. Hunger made the scent intoxicating, smoky, earthy, humble. He scraped every softened bean into a dented tin plate and sat alone at the rough table. No prayer, not because he lacked faith, but because he lacked words. He bowed his head anyway, not in gratitude, in surrender. Then a sound cut through the cabin, not loud, just wrong, a short, startled whinny, his mare Daisy tied behind the house. James stood so fast the chair toppled backward. His hand found his rifle like it was part of his arm. In silence thick as storm clouds, he moved to the door and lifted the latch without a breath wasted. The night outside was a bruised blue world, heavy with cold and dusk, and there, standing 5 paces from the corral, was a boy, small, Apache, alone, barefoot, with dust crusted to his legs and a streak of dried blood across his scalp. His hair hung in tangled ropes. His ribs showed through torn deerskin like harp strings ready to snap. He looked too light for the wind to not steal away. James raised the rifle halfway. The boy did not flinch, not even blink. He looked straight into the rancher's eyes with a stillness older than childhood, a stillness like a wolf who knows running is pointless. James felt something shift inside his chest. He had seen Apache children before, swift shadows at distant ridges, slender silhouettes riding bareback as if bones and horse were one. But never alone. An Apache child by himself meant tragedy, separation, or something worse. Something dark must have torn him from his people. The rancher's finger rested on the trigger, not out of hatred, but the bitter instinct the plains taught every man. A lone Apache was never truly alone. Behind one could stand 10, 30, 100. But there was no sound, no movement in the hills. Only the boy, only those unblinking eyes. James's heart hit once, like a hammer on stone, before settling into the old pain beneath the ribs, the same pain he carried every morning since he buried his family beneath this land. He lowered the rifle, slowly, as if the act itself might break him. "Are you hungry, boy?" His voice cracked on the word like something old and rusted. The boy said nothing, but his chest rose deeper, a breath between hope and caution. He looked at James as if trying to decide whether he was real or a mirage conjured by starvation. James gestured toward the door. The boy hesitated, not out of fear but calculation, then stepped forward, each movement deliberate. Silent as shadow, lighter than a ghost, inside the cabin's warmth wrapped around him like a hand he wasn't sure he could trust. The boy's eyes scanned everything, walls, table, fire, roof beams, not with curiosity but survival. A mind trained to map exits, threats, angles. James placed the tin plate on the table. The boy did not move toward it. "Eat," the rancher said quietly, the word more plea than command. The boy sat, back straight, hands resting on his knees like carved stone. His eyes drifted to the food with a hunger so deep it looked like grief, But still he waited. It took James a moment to understand. Apache custom, a guest does not eat until the host does. The realization struck him like thunder in a dry canyon. He should take a bite, just one, to allow the boy to survive. He lifted a bean to his lips, bitter, soft, tasting of smoke and the last thread of hope. The boy followed, slow, reverent, as though each bite was a prayer to ancestors. James pushed the plate toward him. "Eat, son. I've had enough." This was a lie. Hunger gnawed him like teeth. But something in the boy's hollow face echoed the ghost of Samuel too clearly to ignore. The child ate with silent desperation, not a sound, not a breath wasted. When every bean was gone, he sat still again, hands in his lap, like a warrior twice his age. James waited for words. None came. "What's your name?" No answer. "You run from soldiers, from settlers, from your own people." Nothing. The boy stared into the fire with eyes that held storms, eyes that carried history older than the ranch itself. Hours passed like dust drifting through a beam of light. James dozed in his chair, hunger and exhaustion pulling him under. The boy sat awake, watching flames like memories. When night reached its deepest silence, the boy stood. He opened the cabin door without sound. The cold rushed in like truth. The boy stepped into the darkness, paused, looked back only once, eyes softening just barely, then vanished into the night. James stared at the open door as if waiting for footsteps that never returned. He ate nothing, he slept little, and when he did, his dreams were heavy with loss. His son's small hand, Lillian's warm laugh, the echo of the boy's silence. He woke before dawn, hunger sharp enough to cut. He opened the door, and the world stopped. The valley was no longer empty. On the ridge beyond his ranch, like a wave of earth risen into men, sat 150 Apache warriors on horseback. Feathers of red and black, paint across faces like war stories, spears and bows catching the first light of morning like fire. The air trembled beneath hoof and heartbeat, and at the front, mounted on a dun-colored horse dot, sat the boy, no longer starving, no longer small, wrapped in fresh buckskin, hair braided with beads that burned gold in the sun. He stared down at James, silent still, but different, more than a child, something like dawn itself. The rising sun smeared blood orange across the horizon as if the sky itself had opened a vein. The chill of dawn bit into James Harlow's skin, but the sight before him burned through every drop of cold inside his bones. 150 Apache warriors, still, silent, watching. They were carved from the morning like statues of war. Not a horse stamped, not a spear wavered. Even the wind seemed to bow its head beneath them. James stood barefoot in the dirt, rifle forgotten at his side. Hunger, grief, and disbelief braided together like rope ready to snap. He looked at the boy, front and center, no longer broken or starving, but held aloft by authority older than any government claimed to this land. Feathers trembled in his hair like thoughts the wind refused to steal. The boy raised his chin, just slightly, a signal, a verdict, a memory of beans shared across a table of survival. James's voice cracked through the frost. "I ain't your enemy." The warriors did not move, but something shifted, a ripple across a sea of silence. Then a rider urged forward, older than stone, face weathered like canyon walls carved by gods. His eyes held centuries of thunder, and around his neck hung a pendant shaped like an eagle's talon. Power radiated off him like heat from black rock at noon. This was a chief, not by title, by presence. He stopped a horse length from James. "You fed the boy," the chief said, voice deep as under earth. "Gave what you needed to live." James swallowed, throat dry enough to bleed. "He was hungry," he answered. "Couldn't turn him away and sleep like a man." The chief studied him, long enough for doubt to grow roots in the rancher's gut. The boy in front did not speak, only watched, but James felt his gaze like a hand against the heart, silencing, judging, remembering. Another warrior rode forward, younger, broad-shouldered, eyes like wildfire held behind wet stone. He glared at James with something close to hatred. This one would have killed him if told to. No hesitation, no guilt. The younger warrior spoke sharply in Apache. words like arrows, fast and cutting. James understood nothing, but tone said enough. Why spare him? Why trust a white man? The chief silenced him with a single raised palm. Authority absolute, unquestioned. He turned back to James. You saved our son. Our son? The phrase hit like a bullet to the chest. James's gaze snapped to the boy. Small, silent, steady. A prince among warriors, blood of lineage, not orphan of wind. A prince who had sat at his table eating the last food he owned. The chief continued, voice heavy as drums across desert earth. He was taken. Soldiers. A pause deep as canyon night. He escaped, walked 3 days, no food, no water, no friend. 3 days alone. No wonder the boy's silence felt carved from pain, not absence. James's voice rasped out like a match struggling to burn. He didn't speak a word. Not one. The chief looked at the boy, not with softness, but with pride that weighed more than love. He speaks when the world deserves it. Silence fell like snow, too warm to melt. Then, the moment broke. Hooves thundered. Warriors dismounted in waves. Some rode toward the barn, others circled the house, not threatening, claiming. James's pulse spiked like lightning behind the ribs. What are you doing? The young warrior, the one burning with distrust, approached, voice sharp. You helped him. Now we help you. Help? This looked like a siege. He opened his mouth to protest, but sound died when he saw what they were doing. Not dismantling, restoring. 2 warriors carried planks of fresh pine. Another group hauled clay tiles. 2 women, faces marked with ceremonial paint, knelt at the well. Clearing, cleaning, coaxing life from old stone. They were rebuilding his ranch. The chief spoke again. Our people never forget a debt. You fed a child of the eagle line. We feed you, protect you, strengthen your walls. It felt like dream, fever, ghost memory of hope. James staggered back until his heel touched the doorframe, grounding him to reality that felt too large for one man. Warriors hammered boards, children stacked stones, women stirred pots that smelled like deer and herbs in memory of feasts long gone. Life in a place built of dying. The boy dismounted quietly, walked toward James with steps like soft thunder. He stopped inches from him, small but unbreakable. Then, finally, he spoke. Thank you. The voice was thin, unused, but clear as water over rock, a single word but more than language. A bridge across centuries of blood. James's chest tightened painfully. He wanted to kneel, to weep, to give the boy another meal he didn't have. Instead, he nodded, voice held hostage by emotion. What's your name, son? The boy hesitated only a breath. Tala. The name hit like dawn through fog. Short, sharp, sacred. Tala, wolf. The young warrior spat softly, pacing like a caged storm. He should not be here. White land brings white danger. The chief's gaze cut through him, iron against flame. Danger finds us everywhere. Honor we choose. The chief turned to James again. For 7 sons we stay. Build, hunt, stand watch. After you choose. Go with us, or we leave you strong behind. 7 days, 7 nights, with a tribe of warriors under his roof. James's world, once small as a bowl of beans, now stretched to the horizon like a story still being written. He nodded slowly, hunger replaced by something resembling purpose. I accept. And so the valley changed. Tools scraped earth from dawn to dusk. Horses grazed like thunder laid to rest. Drums sometimes whispered through evenings like heartbeat of land remembering itself. James learned the Apache were not invaders, but river, flowing where needed, carving what resisted, feeding what gave. Tala worked beside him each day, silent often, but present like weather. He carried lumber without complaint, eyes steady, movements efficient, a boy, yes, but forged by survival into something steel-edged. Once, when James's strength faltered under a log, Tala stepped in, smaller yet unmoving as stone. Together they carried weight impossible alone. Not a word spoken, none needed. At night, they ate like kings compared to famine, venison, corn baked under coals, beans mixed with herbs James never knew by name. Laughter sometimes rose around campfires, a sound James had forgotten could exist near his house. Even the land seemed to breathe easier, but not all nights held peace. Storms crawled the horizon, thunder hiding behind mountains like war-biding time. And the young warrior who distrusted James, Coda, kept watch like a knife without sheath, his eyes on James always, his hand near his blade always, his silence sharp enough to draw blood. And something darker moved beneath the calm. Because on the third night, drums stopped, wind died, and Tala walked to James's door long after others slept, face pale beneath moon silver. "You must come," he whispered, the second time his voice had crossed worlds to reach James. "What is it, son?" Tala looked toward the ridge, toward shadow deeper than night itself. "They are here," he said. James's blood froze. "Who?" Tala's voice trembled like cedar in lightning wind. "The soldiers." The chief looked at him, not as white man, not as outsider, but as equal. "We stand." Not fight. Stand. Fight only if forced, war only if war comes to the door. And Harris realized. The meal he gave the boy had not just fed a starving stomach, it fed a future, a treaty written not in ink but in flesh and memory. But treaties break when greed wakes, and greed was stirring. The boy has a vision. 2 nights later, the boy woke screaming, not loud, but sharp, like bone-breaking. Harris was at his side instantly. Sweat soaked the child's brow. His breath came like torn fabric. The boy grasped Harris' wrist with surprising strength and whispered, "Fire, guns, river red, many fall." His grip trembled, "But not if we leave before moon dies." The chief knelt beside them, expression unreadable. "A dream?" The boy did not hesitate. A warning. Apaches believed some children saw beyond sight, felt storms in bone before clouds formed. Elders exchanged looks heavy with respect, with dread. The chief turned to Harris. "We move. Not flee, relocate, not surrender, survive. A village does not die for one ranch. A tribe does not vanish to defend a fence line." But Harris stood and spoke before fear could shrink him. "No." Every warrior turned. The fire crackled like breaking glass. Harris took a breath that felt like lifting stone. "I won't abandon this land. Not to thieves. Not to guns." Silence pressed tight. Then the boy stepped forward, placed his small hand over Harris' heart, and said, "We stay." The chief studied the child long, then nodded. "Then we stay." And history shifted again. He stood there for a long moment, breath slow, eyes fixed on the horizon as if expecting it to answer the chaos that still burned inside his chest. The air was colder than the night before, sharp enough to sting his lungs, but he welcomed the pain. It reminded him he was still alive, that this story was not finished, not yet. His hands trembled, but not from fear, rather from the weight of everything that had happened, everything he still had to face. The world felt impossibly wide, threatening, yet there was something pulling him forward like an unseen hand weaving fate through his bones. He could still hear the echo of the last words spoken in Part 3, a memory heavy as iron. The silence that followed them wasn't empty. It pulsed, breathing, demanding movement. So he walked. Step after step through the dark soil, boots sinking softly, each footprint a promise that he would not collapse no matter how the night tried to swallow him. The boy, quiet, unreadable, still carrying the shadow of the Apache blood he belonged to, followed without asking where or why. There was understanding without language, trust without reason, the kind that forms only when survival is shared. A thin ribbon of moonlight slipped between clouds, painting the land in silver and ash. Coyotes howled in the distance, not warning, just existing. The man wondered how long they had before dawn found them, before the consequences of kindness returned to collect their debt. He remembered the meal shared, the final portion, given without hesitation, and how strange it was that generosity carried such a steep price. Still, he did not regret it. Hunger was temporary. Humanity was eternal. The boy lagged for a moment, not from weakness but from awareness, scanning shadows as though every rock might rise into a warrior. His silence was not emptiness. It was language made of breath and instinct. When he finally spoke, voice low like earth beneath storm water, it felt like the world paused to hear, "They will come." Not a threat, not grief, just truth. The man nodded, jaw tight. He had known it, even before those words existed. You do not feed a starving child belonging to a nation at war and expect the world to ignore it. Compassion has ripples. Some save, some drown. Yet even knowing this, he continued forward, because fate was already carved into motion and fear was useless now. Hours passed, maybe more. Time stretched like leather drying in sun. They walked until the sky softened into pale blue, until birds dared to sing again. And there, far off, almost invisible, smoke rose from the ranch like a thin finger pointing toward destiny. His stomach twisted. Home was no longer refuge. It was battleground waiting to bloom. They approached slowly, quietly. Grass brushed against their legs in whispers. No horses, no movement. Just the house standing lonely against the open plain. Too still, too calm. A breath held by the earth itself. He felt the shift first, that tingling in the spine when watched by unseen eyes. The boy felt it too. Neither spoke, because surrounding that ranch, hidden in the tall dawn shadow, just beyond the edge of sight, was the impossible. Warriors, dozens at first. Then more, and more still, until silence had shape, until fear had heartbeat, until the man, with his throat dry as bone, realized the price of kindness had finally arrived at his door. His breath caught like a fist tightening inside his chest. A sea of feathers, paint, and sharpened steel circled the ranch he had built with his own hands. 150 warriors, silent, disciplined, inevitable, like the land itself had risen into human form. No war cry, no chaos. Just presence, heavier than smoke, older than fences and borders. The boy stepped forward, shoulders squared though small beneath the weight of eyes that judged, remembered, waited. The man's instinct screamed to pull him back, but some deeper understanding rooted his feet to the earth. This was not his moment. This was the boy's bridge to something larger than fear. A single warrior approached, tall as ancient trees, face carved by desert wind and time. His braids hung like black river water. His chest was bare except for a necklace of carved bone glinting like moon shards. In his gaze was not hatred, but calculation, as if he were weighing the cost of blood against the weight of a single act of mercy. The man forced himself to stand straight. He did not beg. He did not raise his hands. His heart thundered loud enough to drown birdsong, yet his voice, when it finally left his throat, was steady as oak roots. I fed him because he was hungry, not because of sides, not because of war, because he is a child. Wind moved between them like a blade sharpening against stone. The chief, for there was no doubt he was chief, shifted his eyes to the boy. A language without sound passed between them. History, kinship, loss. The boy stepped closer to the man, small hand gripping the worn leather of his coat, and for the first time since entering his life, he spoke more than a sentence. He shared his last meal with me. Not loud, just true, a truth too simple to be debated. A murmur rippled through the warriors, low like thunder rolling across distant mountains. Some frowned, some nodded. Some watched the man as though seeing him anew, not as settler, intruder, enemy, but human. The chief raised his hand and silence fell like snow. He approached until they stood close enough to feel each other's breath, two worlds nearly touching. The chief's eyes held storms. Memories of betrayal, land taken, sons buried under white flags, hardness forged by grief. Yet beneath all of it, like fire waiting under ash, there was respect. You gave what you did not have, he said slowly, voice thick as canyon stone. That is the mark of a good man. The rancher swallowed, throat burning. Then let this end here, he whispered. The chief looked at the boy once more, a boy who had survived because a stranger believed he should, a child no longer hungry, no longer alone. What happens to a war when kindness interrupts the wound? After a long breath that felt like the earth deciding its own future, the chief stepped back, lifted his palm high, and the circle of warriors shifted like a river parting around a stone. Horses turned, feet moved, the line opened, not for escape, but for peace. We leave your home standing, the chief said. Your life continues, not because you are strong, but because you remembered how to be human. The boy looked up at the man, not with silence this time, but gratitude deeper than words could shape. He didn't need to speak. The world had listened for him. One by one, like spirits dissolving into dawn, the warriors rode away across the horizon, until only dust remained, soft gold dancing in morning light. No flames, no screams, no war, just quiet, fragile, earned. The man exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The ranch still stood. The sun still rose. And beside him, small but unbroken, stood the boy who had turned death into mercy. He placed a hand gently on the child's shoulder. Not owner, not savior, but companion. "Come on," he said softly. "We'll make breakfast. This time, there's enough for two." And for the first time the boy smiled. The world, though scarred, kept turning, because one poor rancher shared his last meal and changed the fate of 150 warriors with a single act of grace.